Hello, everybody. Let's get started. A little housekeeping before we begin. This session's going to be recorded and will be sent out shortly after we finish up. There's also a Q&A box where you can submit your questions, so please feel free to throw them in there throughout the session, and we've reserved some time towards the end to get to them. Now, firstly, thank you everybody for joining us today, and to my three amazing panelists for participating in what I think is and continues to be a very important topic, and one that's really close to my heart. Before I introduce our inspiring panelists, I want to give you a quick snapshot of the tech industry. Often doing digital events like this one, kind of preaching to the converted, but it still always shocks me when I look at the numbers that illustrate the lack of diversity and equality in science, technology, engineering, and maths, or STEM. I just want to throw a few numbers at you guys. Of the qualified STEM population, women make up only 17%, with the representation of senior females at 14.9%. And in the technology sector specifically, women comprise 28% of senior positions as of 2017. The sad fact is that that number hasn't changed since 2015. And there's still a gender pay gap of over 20% in the technology industry. Why is that? For some answers, we only have to look at our education system. Here in Australia, women make up less than 15% of technologies related undergrads. And as the world moves more and more towards the digital age, these jobs are becoming increasingly more in demand, and we need to make sure that women aren't on the back foot. When women do make it into technology and the digital workforce, they're met with a lot more barriers to overcome. Factors such as bias and stereotypes, career insecurity, a lack of flexible work arrangements, and a lack of female role models have demonstrated to greatly influence women's decisions to entertain and then remain in a career in STEM. As such, I'm personally a really big supporter of organizations such as Girls in Tech, inspiring the next generation of female change agents, and also Mums & Co, where I've been supporting women, and more specifically mothers in business, via free mentoring sessions. As a female founder myself, I've made it my mission to break down as many barriers as I can to enable more women to enter and maintain a career in technology and digital. And that gives me a really good segue to introducing you to some of the other fabulous women who've been breaking down barriers in their careers for women all over the world. Allow me to introduce our panelists. First up, Sam McIntyre. She spent her entire career at the C-suite level with organizations like Tesco in the UK, Woolworths Group, L'Oreal, and Suzanne Group. Sam is focused on building great cultures, teams, and talent, as well as helping women accelerate their careers through mentoring and coaching. Welcome, Sam. It's amazing to have you. Next up, we have Nicole Crivalli. She's had a fantastic career climbing through the ranks at Coca-Cola Amatil for 25 years to become the head of digital marketing and e-commerce. Most recently, she's had a role developing and implementing initiatives to drive diversity and inclusion in a large organization in the resources sector. And finally, we have Amanda Green. Amanda's been noted in Internet's Retailing Top 50 in e-commerce 4 times. Well known throughout the industry for making things happen, she's helped brands such as Nike, L'Oreal, and 2XU thrive through her leadership in digital commerce. So I'm super excited. Welcome to the three of you. It's going to be a really great session. I'd like to start with your mentoring experience. You've had amazing careers, and through all those years, I wonder, was there any experiences you've had as a mentee or a mentor that left lasting impressions on you? Nicole?
Well, to be honest, when I in my early stages of my career, there wasn't a lot of female role models. So I did have some great male managers that were great mentors. I did have a female mentor. I think one of the things that we're lucky being in a big corporate that you're able to get access to lots of different training courses, but the one that sort of stuck in my head the most was one that was actually focused on developing women, giving them courage, giving them being brave, putting their best foot forward, and understanding what being in a male-dominated organisation, what are some of the skills and sort of the things you need to be aware of when you're speaking to a male person. So this course, which is, I've been looking at it recently actually for BH, for the resource company that I'm working for, is based on having mentoring groups. You listen to an hour podcast, you practice some of those activities from that podcast throughout the week, and then you get together as a group and talk about your experiences, and it's called My Mentor for Courageous Women by Emburn. So that was, I guess, one of the programs I thought that really sort of stuck with me from a formal mentoring perspective. I was both a mentee and a mentor. I think I think that was one of the more salient courses that we did that really focused around mentoring.
I love that you're bringing the positive experience you've had and bringing it into the new organization to give that same experience to the new generation. That's fantastic. Amanda, was there anyone in your career that you look up to and check in with every now and again as a mentor?
Yeah, I think I've had two real strong ones. I had one of my first managers when I moved over to Sweden. She almost took me under her wing and gave me such guidance that to this day I still thank her. She never told me a direct what to do and what not to do. It was a gentle guidance, but I think most importantly of all things, she taught me to fail, taught me to push myself beyond my boundaries so that I fail, and importantly to learn from that. How do you recover from that? Because there's too many people who will not push themselves enough to fail, and I think it's one of those strongest things and best things that you can do. And I think one of the people was actually when I did my master's in ecom. He was helping us with our thesis as we're working through, always challenging and always striving for the best thing, and so supportive with all the ideas, and really how could we think about things differently, and really taught me a different perspective of looking things outside of the box. You might think this way, but actually with technology, there's many different ways to get to that same result, and to always question everything. And they're the two people I really sort of credit with the way I think and how I work.
Isn't the best mentorship experiences always those that actually, they don't tell you what to do next. They don't actually answer your questions. They ask you more questions so that you start answering you learn how to answer your own questions and find your way.
Exactly. And that's the best mentor I think you can have. And that's something personally, as I've gone through my career and been a leader to teams and to people, which I love doing. I love encouraging people to think and also bring out the best in them and try and find skills that maybe they didn't even know they had, just by asking those questions.
And Sam, you run this mentorship program for female leaders. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I've got a podcast and which is called Lady Leadership with Sam McIntyre, and also mentoring and coaching. And I'm launching what's called the Career Lab, which launches in a couple of weeks. And it's like a 6-week program to really sort of focus on your career and look at what your vision and mission, etc., and your goals are for yourself, with an action plan that I think, sometimes we hold ourselves back, or we tell ourselves a story that's not necessarily true, or I can't do that because of X. And so it's geared at sort of breaking down all those blockers, or breaking down those things that are holding us back, and pushing yourself a bit more. And if your goal is maybe to be a CEO, then what's the smallest version of that goal that you could possibly make, and make that happen? So I wanted to start a podcast for a couple of years. The smallest version of that was, say, going on someone else's podcast to then kind of get that confidence. So the course is all focused on kind of building confidence to ask for more, want more, and then figure out how you're going to actually make that happen. So, and that's off the back of where I get the most enjoyment in my jobs is actually helping women, as Amanda said and as Nicole said, discover their own capability, discover that they can, or that they've got the skills, and just sort of push themselves to want more. So yeah, and look, I've had some fantastic women in my career, as Amanda said, who haven't told you the answer, haven't given you their opinion. There was one woman that I used to work with, her name was Jackie, and she used to frustrate me because she was so polite, and so she'd just listen to me bang on for hours, about some problem, and she would just be like, okay, yeah. And she would never sort of she was so professional as well, and but a very great listener. And then what would you do about that type of thing? So yeah, she really stands out to me as someone who just had my back as an ear, so yeah.
I like what you said about setting goals, because a lot of times I think we don't set big enough goals. We don't get there. But I think the whole trick to goal setting is actually just set the goal, and then you'll figure out the way. You don't need to know how you're going to end up there.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out once you actually visualize where you need to go.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that big goal, and then the absolute smallest element of that. And so, like I said, that big goal of, say you wanted to be an e-commerce manager. Well, how could you do the smallest piece of that? Could you start your own business? Could you go and spend time with someone who is an e-commerce manager? So let me find out and connect in with all the e-commerce managers, in Melbourne, go along to some events. So how do you start to live in that world and do that job so approach someone in your workforce that's doing that role now? Can I spend time with you? It's all those types of things to then build up. And so a lot of people sort of say, start doing the job before you get the job. So start, ask your boss, can I have some of those tasks? Can I do some of those things for you? That kind of thing.
I think there's an element. Yeah. You go, Nicole.
I was just gonna build on that. The other thing is, there are roles that you might look at, and you might see that there's 10 things, and there's this view that often women will want to have 9 things on that job role before they apply for it. But I think sometimes you don't have to have all those absolute skills. You can just give something a go, and most likely you'll work it out. You'll be able to get there. I think a lot of women hold themselves back as opposed to men applying for different roles because I don't think they're fully ready for it. But I think being brave and just giving something a go is also something to consider as well.
I think that's so true. When I interview for positions, and it's not, you can't generalize, it's not always the case, but a lot of times when a woman walks out of the interview, I'll tell my head of people, you got to add about 50% to what you just heard, because there's a lot more in this woman than we just saw. And sometimes with men it happens to be the opposite. So I just find that it's really interesting, to the point that I think women have to feel 100% comfortable before they actually put up their hand for things. And I learned in my time that all growth is on the other side of comfort. So we have to learn to become comfortable with being uncomfortable to actually grow.
And I think you've just made a great point just then, in terms of, you've been on that interview panel, so you've been able to identify generally that, you have to add 50% to what they've just said. So I think that's another important factor, having those diverse interview panels, so that you can see and read a bit more into the behaviour of a female versus, and this is obviously a general thing, but generalization, but you can see that there's more to that person than what they're actually giving you.
Very true. Have you experienced any gender bias before in this type of situations? Maybe Sam?
Yes, for sure. So in terms of, a couple of times, because I'm a CIO and there aren't as many women CIOs, I've been told, we, buy or hire, they really want to see women. They'd really like to hire a woman in this role. And then I often find that they're not, that needs to be backed up, I think, by something from the organisation, because I just don't think they're that serious about that. And so, down the track, they've then hired a man. And I think that's probably happened to me 3 or 4 times. And so I think, if companies are saying we really want to hire a woman in this role, then are you just actually seeing women? Because, and I think also to Nicole's point, there needs to be a diversity in that in the people that are hiring, and I don't mean HR. I mean the actual, say like yourself, you see that in women, so you see that yes, they're holding themselves back a bit, etc. Or and so, you just need to have that. Most companies that I've gone to don't have that diversity in the hiring, and the women aren't necessarily in the decision-making roles. And I think that really needs to be a focus. And HR doesn't, in organisations, have the power enough to influence to the level that they need to as well.
I think it's also a bit of a numbers game, because there is such a low representation of women in our field, right? I almost feel like mandating to say for every role, if you're seeing 4 people, it should be 2 women, 2 men, right? Even though you're going to get a lot less women even, to reach out to, and that will level the playing field to begin with.
I just know when I've been in a CIO position and a position of hiring, that I've ended up with more women in my team, and I've ended up with more women reporting to me, and not necessarily consciously as well. It's not necessarily been a plan. That's just, so I really see where you've got women in those decision making and those positions of power, they just bring more women behind them, because more women are attracted, more women can see as well, hey, this is someone, a role model, so to speak, she can do it, so therefore I can as well. Mm-hmm. And so, it does just flow down. And you're absolutely right. We've got less numbers. And, we need to be, starting with schools. And there's lots of great groups that are focused on that to kind of highlight and show, yes, there's a great career path that you can have as a woman in technology, in digital, in STEM, etc.
Mm. Who inspires you, Amanda? Do you have a role model?
Yes, I do. It would be my mother. And I know Nicole shares the same sentiment here. So clearly we're peas in a pod here. My mother was a single mother who sort of sacrificed a lot to bring and give the best life for us. She worked full time. She studied part time. It was just her and I our entire life. But what she really taught me was the value of hard work. And I don't think that that's anything you can ever underestimate as a child, seeing someone work that hard, but still having time for you, still being a great parent. But that is the perfect role model as you move forward. So I never take anything for granted. I'm never going to sit there and go, oh, I've got this, great house, whatever, that's, as it is, it's easy. No, I had to work hard for this. And that's sort of values that I hold, and I also then pass on to my children. So as an inspiration, she's really held it up for me. And the things that she sort of achieved and did in her life, I find really inspiring, and really sort of drives me further forward as well to live up to that standard.
Brilliant. And Nicole, it's your mum as well, is it?
It is. So her story is that she came to Australia with her brother and her parents after war-torn Italy. So she was 15. Learnt English on the ship on the way here over the 3 months, and then continued to learn English and went to hairdressing school. So by the time she was 18, she had her own hairdressing salon. Wow. Married at 21, and then had 2 girls, of which I'm the eldest. But I think what she demonstrated is that you can be a businesswoman, you can be a mother, you can be a wife. You don't need to fit into stereotypes. She built, she was also the breadwinner, so she helped build a fantastic life for my sister and I, and themselves, so they can live comfortably in retirement. So she taught me about what being financially independent. Similarly, she worked really hard as well. And I think they were all, she just provided a really great role model for what I could be, and there was never any barriers to not being able to be your full potential. Yeah, she's definitely the inspiration of my life, and she had that business for 35 years, and her clients stayed with her. Many of her clients stayed with her for those 35 years until she retired.
That's such an amazing story. It's hard enough to start a business, but do it at 18 when you've just landed in a country that you don't even speak the language of. It's phenomenal. It's really fantastic. And so you spoke about, her being your role model because she was able to do all of this and still have you guys as kids and show you that both is possible. Now, I know all three of you have children as well. How do you kind of manage the family life and the career at the same time? And how do you feel about mom guilt? How do you manage it?
Who wants to go first?
I mean, I can go. I can talk on that whole work-life balance. I think personally, I struggled with it a lot. I would say probably when the children were younger. My children are 9 and 12 now. We've come to a bit more of a, you've had 12 years of experience by that point. But initially when they were younger, it was really hard for me to get the work-life balance right, because I'd grown up working as hard as I could. I would work till 10 o'clock at night if I needed to, just to get things done, to make sure it was the best it could be. And suddenly you have this other competing priority, which is just as, if not more important, to get right as well. So you really feel quite conflicted in terms of where you should be spending your time, and it's very hard to adjust to. So I think it's taken a good bit of time for me to get that balance right, but it's about being strong in yourself and being decisive about where you're going to spend your time. So for me, between 8 and 6, that's working time. That's an agreement within, the kids know it, I know it, that's just mentally, that's where I am at. But after that time, you come home, you change into your trackies, you put your phone aside, and that's family time. And that's the time you spend with your kids, and you spend one-on-one, you engage with them. Then they've gone to bed 9 o'clock. And then if you need to work more, you work more. But I think you also, in doing that, you become a bit more efficient in your work day as well, a bit more effective. There's no going out for 10 coffees. It's actually, one coffee, the rest of the time is work. You become a bit more focused about your work, and you become a bit more focused about your life. And really get that balance into place. And I would be lost without a to-do list, but that's my savior as I go through a day. Write things in a to-do list so that they're not sitting around in my brain and I'm not focused elsewhere. I think for me, that's been sort of one of the things I've learned as I've gone along, is to really carve out time.
That is so true. I think children teach us so much about prioritization and time management, and making sure that we're focused on what we're doing in the moment. And, personally, I think working with other mothers, you can tell that they use every minute of the day, and they know how to get things done in a very short period of time. What's been your experience with that, Nicole?
So my girls are a little bit older. So one's 19 at uni, online uni, sadly, at the moment, and because I'm based in Melbourne, and one is 16 in year 11. So they're really independent girls now. So that's amazing. I'm similar to Amanda. I like to get things done, and I will probably work longer hours during the week, but I try and keep my weekends free. I like to get things off my to-do list out of my head so I can sleep properly at night. So I'll work the extra mile during the week, but weekends I just like to have those free for family and friends. Sadly, we're not allowed to catch up with our friends other than on Zoom calls at the moment, so lots of walking around the area. Listening to podcasts is probably how I'm spending my off time, but similar to Amanda, I like to get things done and just try and use my time as efficiently as possible. And dinner time is, we all sit around the table, turn the TV off and talk, and that's our sort of talking time.
So it sounds like the tip and trick that I'm hearing from the two of you at this point in time is focus on your work when you're in it, and then actually let go of it and really switch off, put your phone away for those 2 or 3 hours you've got in the evening to spend with the children and the family.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Sam, what about mum guilt?
Mum guilt. Yeah, so we were talking about this earlier. I don't really suffer from mum guilt, and a bit like Amanda and Nicole, you know, I'm organised, and when I'm in work, I'm in work, and when I'm not, I'm not. And you know, I'm sort of I like having my own sense of identity. I've always been ambitious, and you know, I think it was quite an adjustment when I had my first, going from like a big job to being home and with a baby, but I was more than happy to head back to the workplace. And, you know, I think it's good to be a role model for, I've got sons, you know, good to be a role model for them and to show them what, you know, working mother contributing, you know, 50-50 relationship looks like. I have a, you know, terrific partner who brings his 50%. Some would say he might bring a bit more. And so, you know, it's about kind of sharing those duties and, you know, being parents to children and not just it being on mum. I have had other people try and put mum guilt on me and be like, oh, it's a shame you're not home with the kids, or who's looking after the children, and I just don't worry about that. And, you know, I know that my kids are happy and healthy and, you know, well adjusted. So that's what I focus on.
I love that you can just free yourself from that and not actually like that's fine. It's not for me. I'm perfectly happy, you know, doing things the way, doing me, you know, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think I think some of that guilt is that people portray onto you is more of an insecurity on them. So yeah, I think I probably take things more to heart than just let it brush over. But I do think, you know, when you stand back and you're like, well, why would they say something like that, which is, you know, can be hurtful. And I think it often comes down to their own insecurities.
Yeah, and I'm also conscious that I can't be everything to everyone, and you know, my family, my children come first, and so that's, you know, I'm very conscious of that. And probably, you know, like Amanda said, you know, when I was younger and I didn't have children, I'd work till all hours of the evening, and you know, I think as you get older in your career as well, you do get more organised. You've done things plenty of times, so it is a bit kind of, you know, paint by numbers in terms of some of the tasks and things that you've done. You've been there, you've done it before, and so you do things quicker than say what you would have done, you know, years earlier, so to speak.
That's definitely true, and I find the same in my own time. You know, I've always run companies since I've been 16 years old, and having my son 5 years ago changed a lot of things for me and just how I actually look at things and how I do things. And I never thought it's possible to get more done in less time. I used to basically just go home to sleep for many years and leave the office only for that. And since I've had him, you know, I've constantly tried to change and be more conscious of the time I spend with him. And now I'm in the office 10 to 4 and it works better than ever. So it's actually nothing to do with the time you spend. It's what you do with that time that turns everything around. So, now
No, it's all right. Well, I was just going to say, I'm always kind of negotiating with my partner, like, okay, you're there Wednesday night, I'm here, you know, it's a kind of a, like, we look the week ahead of who's on, you know, we're always making sure one of us is with the children. So, yeah.
That's so true. You do need a good support system, right? You can't do it on your own. If you either with a partner or some other family members or elsewhere, you've got to make sure that you got that backup to be able to do the things you need to do, and you're also comfortable with who's with your children during that time as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Just a quick reminder to our listeners, you can put in questions. We're starting to get a few into the Q&A box in case you missed that in the beginning. I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about, since we're on the topic of kids, do you think recent events with COVID and, almost all organizations shifting to work from home is going to change things for women in particular, and in terms of how we actually look at work-life balance? What do you think, Amanda?
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so. I think there has to be a silver lining to all of this. And for me, from when I'm in Melbourne as well, so we're stuck in the house. And from when this has happened, it's been a bit of a blessing in terms of it's forced companies to let people work from home and force them to realize it's not a thing that only mums need to do or occasionally. It actually works for everyone. Suddenly you're not commuting, you're not spending hours in traffic, that you're losing hours, which doesn't benefit anyone, doesn't benefit your family or your work. You can sit at home and you can get a lot more done. So for me, I really hope that this does change that approach, and that you have these days where it's 3 days in the office and 2 days at home, because from a work-life balance, it's great. At 8 o'clock, you can be in your office working, you can finish at 5 or 6, but you're already at home. So your dinner's an hour earlier, you've got an hour more with your kids or your husband or walking the dog. Your balance is suddenly a little bit shifting towards half-half as opposed to sort of 80% work, which for me has just been amazing. And I really hope that industries learn from this and then we continue with that same sort of approach.
Yeah, I do think COVID's also really driven a digital transformation. It's really forced a lot of companies, and not the one I'm working for in particular, but has forced a lot of companies to get all their digital enablement in play so that people can work from home. Even from obviously a school perspective, it's allowed my kids to be able to do everything online. So I think that is the silver lining, hopefully, of COVID, is that it's allowed businesses to set up their infrastructure to allow anyone to work from home, and to think about how to operate a little bit differently and make sure that people are still engaged, even though it's through Zoom and things like that. So, and I've really enjoyed being able to work from home. I think the thing that I've implemented that I didn't have before is either being able to go for a walk at the start or the end of my day. It sort of allows me to just sort of clear my head for a bit, which is something I just never had time to do before. So that is the silver lining.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really old school mentality that people have to be sitting in front of you to know whether they're doing work or not. People can be sitting in front of you and not doing anything. And so, I worked in the UK 12 years ago. I was there for about 8 years, and there was a much higher sort of preference for, a lot of people would fly in from different countries. They'd fly in maybe on a Tuesday morning, they'd fly out on a Thursday night. So there's much more propensity for people to work from home. That's a decade ago. So I think Australia needs to sort of catch up with that. It's because our towns are closer, our people are closer, that there's this expectation that you need to go to an office every day to connect. And I just don't think you need to. And, I think, like you said, having a better balance, there's always going to be great, there's, when you catch up with people face to face, there's always great engagement, but do you have to do it every day? I don't think so. And my 9-year-old wandered in earlier and gave me a hug and said, I haven't given you a hug today, Mum. And that's the kind of nicety about being a bit more around your children as well. So I found during this period that our family has gotten a bit tighter, kind of because we've had to, but there's been you've had to work out your family rules and all of that kind of stuff. It's sort of forced that on you. So yeah,
even from as a business owner, it was really eye-opening, I have to say. And we've been talking about how do we enable work from anywhere, anytime, for many years, and there was all these kind of barriers in our own minds about all the things we need to get in place to be able to do that, even with the best will to achieve it. And then all of a sudden, March came along and we were all working from anywhere, anytime in the space of 24 hours, and it just worked. So I think personally for me, there was a really big learning that you don't need to overthink these kind of things. Sometimes you just have to take the plunge and do it, and then fix whatever doesn't work, rather than try to spend too much time planning it to make it perfect and it never happens. So yeah, I think
I agree with that.
Yeah, having cutting out the commutes, given us all a lot of time back in our lives that we can all use for better things, whether that be work or family, right? It's just a lot better spent that way. Very good. Getting to a question from our audience here. What approaches have you seen work best in the recruitment process of companies to ensure gender diversity? What's your experience there, Nicole? I know you've done some work on this recently.
So the company I'm currently working for is quite male dominated, and I think but they have set a gender equality target to be gender equal by 2025, and I think setting that target and having buy-in or having that belief at the most senior level has forced people to have to think differently in all facets, whether that be recruitment, engagement, and what that culture of that business looks like. So things that they have started to do differently as a result of that target is the way they advertise on LinkedIn, showing that there are females within the non-traditional roles within the business. The way they write their ads, they had to think about, is it really important that this person has got resource experience, which is very male dominated, or is it important that they have problem solving skills, leadership skills, whatever the skills are that are more transferable across industries. Making sure that they have a panel with females on it, so that they can look for those cues that where that women might be holding back, and then trying to ensure that their culture is a lot more inclusive and diverse, so that once they've got talent into the organisation, that they can actually retain them. They're still on a journey, obviously, but they're some of the things that have happened within the company that I'm working at to try and bring more women into their organisation.
And Sam, what's your experience there? Having been CIO and held C-level positions in a lot of organizations, what do you think organizations can actually do to drive that?
Yeah, I think all of what Nicole just said, and actually having a process, having a strategy regarding it, having a process, the people that actually are hiring, and as I sort of mentioned earlier, just having that diversity around roles and around who's in hiring positions, aside from HR, and just having a focus on it, and actually it being something that gets discussed at a board level and also at a C-suite level, and being an objective of the organisation. And I think also the why of why you're doing that as well. So it has to actually be taken from the top through the organisation as to the reasons why. And then, as Nicole said as well, when women come into roles, then having that structure to actually support them and for them to be successful. So all of those things. The last two companies I've worked in have been very female orientated. So they probably both had the reverse situation. And so it needs to be a focus that people and organisations are taking seriously.
So the reverse exists as well then. Is there something to be done about this too?
Oh, it's a good question. It depends, what I've seen in some of these organisations is they might be very female orientated, but then some of the P&L decision making is actually owned by men. So even though they are very female orientated with lots of female senior executives, the top jobs are still held by men in some organisations. And so, I think for women to get real breakthrough, they actually need to be owning P&L. That seems to be the creme de la creme. you see a lot of women in supporting roles, supporting those P&L owners, but the P&L are the key decision makers. So, yeah.
Yeah, very true. The decision-making power, right? It's where the money is.
Yep, it's where the money is. Yeah, I've found on most exec teams there's an A team and a B team. You know, the A team are the P&L owners, and the B team are everyone else supporting those P&L owners. That's it.
Yeah,
basically.
We've got another really good question. As we know, and we spoke about this earlier in the session, women only apply for a role that they are nearly 100% qualified for, and men may be 30% qualified and feel perfectly confident to apply for these roles. As hiring leaders, do you take this into account when a woman undersells herself and a man oversells themselves in the interview process? And how do you choose the woman when the man did a better job selling himself? Have you experienced this, Amanda?
Yes. I think it's a really hard one to navigate through, really, isn't it? I mean, it's because it comes down to an interview process at the same time. So it's how you sell yourself in that hour, whether you're female, male, like everyone struggles in interviews differently, right? So as the interviewer, you have to try and see through that a bit. And sometimes you're going to miss the mark. I've got a very good, I guess, bullshit radar in terms of people trying to oversell themselves, because you can ask pointed questions in order to, I guess, get to the truth of what they actually did. Because if someone says they're doing this, so you can ask questions, oh, how did you do X, Y, and Z, which they would have had to do that. And if they can't answer that, then you know that, they're probably overselling what they did. To the same extent, you can maybe ask more guiding questions to another person, but then it comes down to your morality. Is that fair? Then you've guided one person in the right way to answer a question and not the other person. So it becomes a bit of a minefield, to be honest. So as much as you can, cutting through the bullshit and trying to see 50% more of what that person did, but sometimes you just have to sit there and go, it came down to an interview process, unfortunately. So it comes back to us to sell ourselves a bit better and learn that skill, which personally I need to do as well. And I think everyone sort of should have that skill, that we all try and get to that level playing field where we're all selling ourselves really well. And then this wouldn't be a discussion.
I think a lot of times as women, we're our own worst enemy in our own head. Yeah. And the self-talk that we have is doesn't help us actually, think of ourselves and our full potential in the right light. Sam, do you have any tips and tricks of how to overcome this disparity in how women sometimes represent themselves?
Yeah, I think you've got to get that story down pat as to, the requirements of the role versus the skill set that you've got and the junction in between those, and how you kind of put your best foot forward in, and be really kind of definitive about what you're wanting out of that and why you're there and why that's a good organisation, etc. And, practice. So, you get good at doing something by practicing. So practice, those sort of mock interviews, or, think hard about those questions that you're going to be asked. And we've all been in that situation where we've gone to an interview and they've asked a question that we haven't felt as though we've put our best foot forward for. And, you're kind of kicking yourself afterwards as well. And, but sometimes people can't think on the spot always as well. It's and so I think interviewers need to kind of take that into account as well. And so it shouldn't just be a kind of a one-step process as well. So, it's getting good at answering questions about yourself and your why and that purpose and what you're going to bring to the organisation, and how what you've done supports that, and good examples of those things. And they're based around sort of money saving. So how have you saved money in an organisation? How have you made change in an organisation? How do you like to work with others? You're going to get asked all those questions, and so you can Google interview questions and write your answers, practice your answers, practice with a friend, until you kind of get good at, someone should be able to ring you up in your sleep and you should be able to tell them why you'd be good to do a job.
I think from my perspective, like when I get the sense of a candidate, actually there's a lot more to them than I'm seeing in the interview process, I would usually try to figure out, give them a task or something to come back with, to present on, and ask them back in a session where they're more comfortable and they have an opportunity to prepare. And then a lot of times I tend to see more layers of that person than I would if I just put them on the spot.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That's something that in previous roles that we started doing for that very reason. So, during the interview process, we found, the recruiter and I found that the women or the females that came to the interview process were often underselling themselves. So we would have a two-step process where the first one was an interview and the second one was doing a case study, and for them to present all the interview and to try and make it fair. Also, to your point, Amanda. So they had to present a case study which would demonstrate their knowledge, their skill, what their thought processes were, how they problem solved. So we'd bring all those skills to the fore in that case study process. So that was a way to sort of for them to demonstrate their skills without having to sell themselves necessarily. So that's a really good point.
Can I just add something else, Fatima? I think also, often, and so this is, as an interviewee, often a number of people can do the job, and often, so you might get 2 or 3 people that you interview, and maybe you feel comfortable that 2 or 3 could actually do the job, but you're going to make a decision based on, say, how you think they might fit in with the culture of the team, etc., and all of those things. So often and my husband gave this analogy of, if you're looking at houses and you go and look at a couple of houses, and one, you might just like the bathroom or the color of the walls slightly more than, say, another one, or another house just kind of feels more right. It's not necessarily that there's something wrong with someone and they didn't get a job for that reason. It's just that, wallpaper slightly, and I don't mean that in a facetious way. Sorry, that's not a good, but do you know what I'm saying? It's often, it's actually, you do have to choose one person, and in actual fact, a couple of people can, and it's often pretty close, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't always mean that you're not actually capable of doing the job, right? It's a fit question a lot of times.
Yeah. And back to my point about we just need more women hiring as well. So then women will see qualities in women that maybe sometimes men don't.
Very good. And another question from the audience: what's the best approach in finding and choosing the right female mentor as a leader? How do you start about going that? How do you consider if you've never done it before?
I'll answer this. I think anyone, I think getting out to events, meeting people, networking, so it's a bit hard to get out to events at the moment, but certainly coming along to things like this. And, any woman who I would say yes to any woman that approaches me to have a coffee or to have a quick conversation about their career, etc. And I've had many women do that over the years. So I think you've got and also creating a little network of your own. So I've got a little network of women, which we call ourselves the Amazing Ladies. And it's a group that we've formed. We're all professional ladies. We've got a little WhatsApp, and we connect and talk about roles. We talk about career opportunities. We talk about things that we're struggling with, etc. So creating that kind of network as well, finding people in your industry, finding people that have experience in, say, what you're aspirationally wanting to do, connecting with them, and then seeing if you've got rapport and seeing if you can work together and seeing if that relationship continues.
I think that's really valid, and I'd also probably just add that it doesn't need to be just one person, right? You can actually just find people that have the qualities that you're trying to build, and then approach them. Don't be shy, approach them, and go ask for a coffee with them, and then you start building your network of people that you actually can learn from in different areas of your personal growth and professional growth at the same time. Yeah. Good. We've got lots of more questions coming in, guys. We're running out of time, last 3 minutes. I'm going to use one more audience question and then we'll do a quick wrap up. When it comes to promotions within a company, I think oftentimes we see men being promoted to roles because they tend to be more vocal about their ideas and opinions, and therefore tend to be more visible. That limits the talent pool when we're looking for women to take high-level roles. How would you recommend that as a leader, we encourage women around us to speak up and highlight their talents so opportunities become more available? What do you think, Amanda?
It probably depends on your culture and where you're working to a lot of it. I mean, I think emulate what you see happening. If guide these females, if they're seeing males be more vocal and talk about their successes, do the same thing. Learn to speak up, learn to do the same thing. Learn that way of communicating what you've achieved. It's a hard thing to do when it doesn't naturally come to you. We naturally like to achieve, get our job done and go, yep, we've done a great job and keep on going, hope someone notices. We need to learn to go that next step further, which is then to shout from the rooftops about it, right? So if you're seeing people being promoted for doing X, Y, and Z, that's probably the culture you're working in. So you kind of need to do that as well. But it's always going to be still, it's going to be valuable, right? If you're not comfortable in doing it, it's always good to be out of your comfort zone, like you said before. Learn it, do that. Ultimately, though, if you're not getting promoted and you feel you're being overlooked in that company, maybe it's not the right company for you. Sometimes, you know, you've got to also feel with your gut. You've got to be happy where you work. And if you're not comfortable there, you feel you're being overlooked, look elsewhere where maybe that culture, that flexible working, that support for you is actually there. And maybe you don't need to shout from the rooftops because everyone's of a similar nature. It does come down to the person and probably looking more into that person's ultimate, I guess, how they are and how they like to act.
Anything to add to that, Sam and Nicole?
Yeah, I'd just add, you know, if there's a role that you're interested in, then go and find out about that and talk to people about, okay, how could I be considered for something like that? So have a career conversation with your boss and say, I'm interested in X, Y, Z. What skills do you think I need to develop? And get that feedback, get some feedback from some colleagues. So I say go hunting. Go, you know, I've always been focused on what's the next job and what's the job after that. So what are the next 2 jobs that I want? What are the skills I need? Who do I need to network with here? So I think it's really important for people to realize that in organizations, it's not one person necessarily who's going to make a decision about a role. Often senior teams will get together, talk about that talent pool, and then be actually selecting people that could potentially step into that. So there's a process for that. Not all organizations. And so it's being on the radar of those decision makers and having relationships with those people. And so when your name maybe comes up at the table, they know who you are and they can comment and say yay or nay for that that step. So, you know, I think there's a couple of things that you can do. You know, look at the skills that you need to develop, talk to colleagues, talk to your boss, create relationships with the decision makers in that organisation so they know who you are. Put your hand up for extra work. So say, I want to work on XYZ project, go hunting for work. So I was a contractor in the UK. I used to hunt for work in organisations to extend the longevity of my career at that organisation if I liked it. So I would be, if I knew a project that I was working on was finishing, I'd be putting my hand up for the next project and saying, I'm really interested in XYZ. I hear that we might be kicking that off soon. How do I get involved with that? So you've got to ask. I didn't get to where I was in my career by not asking. And I think it is harder for women. And I think you've got to shout a bit louder and you've got to put your hand up and, you know, you'll get told whether you're being annoying or not. Do you know what I mean? So... yeah, and maybe you'll have to leave.
If
you know, people tell you to back down. Sorry?
Yeah. If you don't ask, you don't get, right?
If you don't ask, you don't get. I've seen someone, and I was working in the UK, and the company I worked for opened a business in the US, and I just happened to be flying from the UK to India with someone who was working in the US, and I said to that person, I'm really interested in working in the US. We're on a plane, and you know, I ended up getting a job in the US. So do you know what I mean? That's kind of what you got to do. You've got to tell people that you're keen. You've got to tell people the skills that you've got. You know, I hear men say, oh, you know, I was running supply chain and then they saw how fabulous I was, and I'm being a bit facetious, and they said to me, come and run marketing, etc. I don't think that happens for women. And I think you've got to say, I want to run marketing, and how can I run marketing, and what am I going to be, you know, how can I make that happen? And like Amanda said, if it's not going to happen there, then you need to make that decision and go somewhere else where you might be able to make it happen. I'm quite passionate about that, actually. You can probably tell.
No, that's really brilliant advice. I think it's so true, right? I see it all the time. So it's definitely about being proactive and, going out there to actually chase what you want. So we're out of time. This was a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much to the three of you for giving us this insight into your careers and your personal lives. You've been such amazing role models to me over the years. I've always looked up to the three of you. So, thank you for your generous time. And of course, thank you to all our participants for attending. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. If you have any questions about today, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself on LinkedIn. And I think Nicole, Sam, and Amanda would also be more than happy to answer any questions over LinkedIn for any of you as a follow-up. So I hope you're all staying safe and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fatima.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.